Well, it's time for us to get into a conversation on a health segment, and we're talking today about asthma and all you need to know about asthma. Very important conversation, considering we just came out of Hamatan. There's been COVID before, and there were all the respiratory challenges that we've experienced and all that. Well, there's no better person than the birthday boy, Dr. Kelvin Owusu. Yes, he had his birthday a couple of days ago. He's the head of occupational health and wellness at Claron Health International. And Dr. Kelvin, good morning.
Nobody know that.
You didn't know that.
No.
We celebrated here in style. So
I
we
know,
put
right?
photos on screen and so yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So has the party happened without me?
Not yet. But how can the party happen without you?
It's not possible. All right. Well,
It's good to have
belated
you.
happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Right.
It's good to be back. I mean,
Yeah.
it's always good to be here,
Charlie.
See his hair,
Anyway,
fine
I know,
working.
right? I know.
Charlie.
Charlie. I was
The guy
try-
couldn't
I
keep
was
the
trying to do
afro.
that thing, but Charlie, it wasn't
I
working.
think it's modern. Charlie. Anyway, Doc, so we're talking asthma.
Yes, we
No,
are.
First and foremost, I want to find out, are people born with asthma, or can you just contract asthma?
So
At any
technically,
stage, yeah.
we don't diagnose asthma before 6 months age. 6 months old.
Okay.
So in that sense, then the answer is no.
Okay.
However, there is a familial, genetic predisposition to asthma. So if it runs in your family, the probability that you have it is high.
Okay.
So you could start having some symptoms before the 6 months age. If you call it something else until after 6 months, then we know
Okay.
if it stays or if you have a repeated episode, then we know this is asthma.
Okay, so can it happen that in your first 6 months, we don't detect anything, and then at 10, you have asthma?
Yes, you can even have asthma diagnosed for the first time in adulthood.
Okay.
So it's very possible.
So what triggers that?
So I mean, it's like I said, there's a genetic predisposition,
Okay.
and then there's also an environmental component.
Okay.
So there's actually a category called work-induced asthma. So if you work in an area or in an industry where there are a lot of allergens.
Okay.
Allergens could be chemicals, could be dust, could be
Yeah.
smoke, could be
Plants.
food. Exactly. So depending on which industry you are working in, it could actually trigger an asthma that was dormant.
Okay.
And there are some
Okay.
people who may also have been asthmatic in childhood. They have never had an attack for 20 years, and then they suddenly start experiencing asthma again. Some people might even move houses, right? They move from this area to a different area,
Yeah.
and they
And
suddenly
something
start
triggers
experiencing exactly.
Okay.
So there's a heavy environmental component when it comes to asthma.
So of all the respiratory tract infections, what
Yeah.
So asthma. So first of all, asthma is the most common respiratory tract anything, especially in childhood. I mean, in the U.S., for example, 7 million children are diagnosed with asthma every year.
Wow.
I mean, so that's the prevalence of asthma in the U.S. 7 million children. So it's
7 million?
yes,
That's a lot.
yes.
Wow.
Every
Yes.
year?
So prevalence means if you were to check for asthma diagnosis this year, that's what you'd find.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean that
In
they
the
were
year
diagnosed
under
this year,
review.
but
Okay.
that's what you'd
Yeah,
find.
okay.
But overall, we are looking at over 20 million people living with asthma in the US. We don't have that much. We don't have data in Ghana, so we have to rely on other people's data. But in Ghana, we see it quite a lot as well. And what you also realize is that, and David started by saying that we just came out of Hamatan. Yes,
Yeah.
in Hamatan, because there's a lot of dust in the air, it's and I already mentioned that dust is an allergen, so it begins to trigger a lot of asthma in a lot of people. But it's not just the Hamatan. Usually, what happens is that every time the season is changing,
Okay.
especially in the transition, transition zone,
Period,
yes,
yeah.
transition period, there tends to be a hike in asthma and all other allergic conditions. Now, asthma is sort of as part of a spectrum of disease conditions. We have people who have allergic conjunctivitis. They wake up in the morning and they'll rub their eye for donkey hours before they are well. Then they have people with allergic rhinitis. They have
Rub the nose.
itchy nose, running nose. Then there are those with atopy, or it's a skin eruptions, especially when they come in contact with certain allergens.
Yeah.
If any of these three runs in your family, the risk of asthma is also high because it's part of that brotherhood or sisterhood. I don't know which is which, but they kind of move together.
Okay, so personally, when I finish bathing, I don't want to go close to the bathroom. I don't want water and stuff like that. Even a wet towel, I don't want to touch it because I will itch. But I don't have any. Okay. No, but what does that mean?
Well, so, I mean, people have different responses to various
That
things.
can be asthma.
It's not asthma, you know, but it could still be part of the allergic cycle. Maybe there's something in the water or something in the soap or something in one of the items that you're using around that period that does not agree with your skin.
No, but I don't want to see it. I don't know. It's not like using it. I don't want to see
that one,
it.
we have to go deeper.
But I've
so
lost.
could it be psychological?
That's what we have to go deeper. Okay. We have to open certain things and find out what
Well,
happened
please
in
do,
a
because
past
it
life.
it can be worried. But I've lost a niece to asthma.
Yes, and that's, I mean, it's rather unfortunate, but that's actually something that is overlooked quite often.
Yes.
People assume that asthma is, asthma, dear, you know, we know asthma. No, you don't know asthma. Asthma can be a deadly disease. If you don't act on it, you will die. You know, so it's unfortunate that you lost your niece, but that's actually what asthma is.
Because she had an attack, so she lived in London with her mom. She had an attack in the night. I think she went to the washroom, so she didn't have an inhaler, and she had an attack, you know, and couldn't reach out to anybody.
Wow.
And so that was it.
I mean, that's serious. But you see,
Very,
that's the
very
thing about asthma. You see, there are inhalers and there are other things that you're supposed to have. Now, most of the time, especially people who haven't had an attack for a while, they tend to ignore or they tend to throw away their inhalers. You see, but ideally, you should have an inhaler on you at all times because you don't know when it could be triggered. Now, if you have active asthma, I mean, you're still getting attacks, you should actually have multiple inhalers. If your child is asthmatic, for instance, the teacher should have an inhaler in school. There should be an inhaler in the bag. There should be an inhaler in various vantage areas. I mean, so that wherever the attack happens, you know, there's somebody who is aware and can quickly, administer something. You see, okay. I mean, there are two main categories of asthma treatment options or treatment aids. They are the relievers and then they are the preventers.
Okay.
You know, the relievers are for when the attack is happening. I need something to help me relieve the symptoms. You know, asthma basically refers to the symptom, the pathophysiology. Those are the big terms. The thing that results in the symptoms is because of a narrowing of the airway. You know, the airway, the windpipe, it divides into the bronchi, which then divides into bronchioles, and then eventually ends in the alveoli. Now, along the line, the divisions become very, very narrow, and the cells that line these bronchioles, you know, they thicken. You know, so, and this happens, it's literally there all the time. So that's why it's a chronic inflammatory condition. You know, then periodically it gets exacerbated, so then it gets even worse, and that's when you have an asthma attack. Okay. So people who are asthmatic tend to have some baseline symptoms at all times, you know, but those symptoms are triggered when they are exposed to an allergen or any of the triggers that they know. And the typical thing is that most asthmatics know what trigger their asthma, you know, which makes it a bit easier to avoid. Yeah. You see, some people, it could be a particular food. I know asthmatics that when they eat rice, they get an attack. Wow. So avoid rice. You know, I know it's not easy. It's not easy, but if you know.
So what is on the screen?
So that's actually what I was trying to explain. So on the screen, they are comparing the normal lung tissue with the abnormal.
Oh, wow,
so
that's extremely small.
Exactly. So there's a thickening of the lining of the bronchioles, you know, and this is compounded by mucus. You know, so mucus also is secreted, and it even further narrows the lumen. The lumen is the inside, the space inside the bronchiole. So it further narrows it, making it difficult for air to enter through the bronchioles into the alveoli. You know, so asthmatics tend to struggle with breathing, and that's why they have the chest, what they describe as chest tightness. And then if you actually sit close to an asthmatic, you can actually hear, you can actually hear the wheezing. You know, it's kind of like a whistling sound when they come out, when the air comes out. You know, so all these are part of the asthma cycle. You know, and I was saying that, so those symptoms tend to be there, you know, on the low for asthmatics, especially if it's not well controlled. You know, but occasionally it's exacerbated by the triggers. So if it's rice, is it dust? Is it some chemical, exhaust fumes, or cigarette smoking? You know, now you go to the pubs, people are smoking. You know, there is this shisha, all these things. It could trigger asthma in some people. You know, and so once that trigger happens, then the lumen is further narrowed. So then the person has the asthma attack where they are literally struggling to breathe. You see, and at that point they need the reliever medication, and the relievers tend to be inhalers that you puff 1, 2, and then it helps open up the airway, you know, so that you can get some air in there. Now the preventers, on the other hand, you don't take them when the attack has happened, because their role is to prevent the attack. So the preventers, you are supposed to take them. Some people are taking them every morning and every evening. Now this is where we have a challenge, you know, because, and especially this year, because times are hard, you know, so people are not being consistent on their medication, you know, so they are only taking it when they feel they may have an attack. It's not advisable. If you are supposed to take it every morning, please take it every morning.
Is it expensive?
It's, well, I mean, as they say, expense is relative, but yes, it's pretty.
I mean, we are talking about Ghana, you know, we're talking about.
Well, Ghana, everything is expensive, but yes, it's pricey. It's pricey.
Yeah. So let's say you're taking a reliever and you're on it for about, let's say, 6 months. What sort of, you know, financial management do you have to do to be able to handle that?
I mean, you see, it's if you want the how do I put it, the correct brands, you have to fork out the cash to get it, and that can be expensive, you know. So I may not have a definite price.
So in what, like the thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of dollars?
Well, not maybe hundreds of dollars.
So
but you see, to the average.
so then CDs.
Yeah.
is
So
really
let's
big to
say
the thousands of CDs.
you are asthmatic. Okay. How much do you?
You probably
like,
need about 100, 150, almost up to about 250 every couple of weeks.
Okay.
You know, depending on how poorly controlled the asthma is, you see, because you
let's say
need
500
the
cities
two.
a month.
It's possible.
Dedicated to your
If
medication.
it could actually be more.
Okay, let's say 1,000 cities.
It could.
Okay. Is it curable?
No, asthma is not curable. What happens though is that your symptoms tend to get better with age.
Okay.
So children tend to have more severe disease, and as they are growing, the body sort of adjusts and they overcome it at some point. You know. But that's where the trick is. You need to always keep in mind that you are still an asthmatic patient. You just have not had an attack in a long while. So you should, for all intents and purposes, still keep an inhaler around you, you know, every now and then, because some activity could trigger the asthma. Some people, their trigger is actually exercise, you know, and there are footballers who are actually asthmatic. So we are not saying that you cannot live a normal life. You can live a normal life, but you have to obey the rules of the game, you know. So there are some people who are required to actually take their medication, like what we call the relievers. They are actually required to take it if they know they are going into a place where their trigger is. So if I know that my trigger is exercise and I'm going to exercise, it's advisable to actually take the reliever right before you go and do that exercise.
But can I take the reliever and eat rice? If that is my trigger, because after the rice issue, it worries me.
You see, but the good thing is that because most people tend to have asthma in their childhood, if they figure out that the rice is their trigger,
they are not trained with it anyway,
exactly,
so you don't miss anything. But what is the rate of survival for people who get attacks, right, and don't have their relievers on them?
So, I mean, if you do...
How quick do you have to maybe get a reliever or maybe get to the hospital or anything? How long can you stay?
I mean, you see, we are talking about breathing. Asthma literally is attacking your breathing. You cannot breathe. So that's how serious it is.
So in minutes you are gone?
Well, I mean, if you can get to the hospital within the hour, we can do something about it. Okay. I mean, there are when you get to us, there are higher level, should I say, mechanisms that we can apply, such as nebulization. You see, whereas the relievers, you are puffing it yourself. There are systems. The nebulizer is an oxygen-powered air pump that's put over your nose, and so the oxygen sort of forces the reliever into your lungs. So like by force, the lung
in
must
terms
open
of
up.
your effort, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You still be expected to breathe in, you see. But see, naturally, because you are trying to, you are not getting enough air. Your respiratory rate is already high,
Yeah.
you know, and so it sort of goes along with it and then calms you down eventually. But some people may eventually actually need to go on the life support machine.
Wow.
That's how severe asthma attack can be.
Right.
You know.
So let's say David is a parent, okay, and maybe his son. I'm using his son because I don't want to use his daughter. I know his daughter.
The son will come later.
Well, when it comes there. So let's say David has a son who is asthmatic. Are there things he needs to know? Let's say the inhaler is not available. We went out and the child has an attack. Are there things like first aid mechanisms, stuff you can do to save the situation, or once the attack comes, you know that?
So the fact of the matter is that if your child is asthmatic, you must have the inhaler on you at all times.
I get that.
So that's
I get
that's
that
the
is
first
yes.
aid.
In fact, not just one mpu. Some in
Exactly.
the car, some in your
Exactly.
handbag, everywhere.
Exactly.
But in an instance where there's no reliever, okay, and there's an attack, for instance, what can you do? So just as you teach someone, if somebody collapses, is there maybe how to resuscitate the person immediately? Are there stuff like that I can do for an asthma patient? Or let's say David is my colleague in the office. Okay, for some reason,
He's now developing the thing.
you know, for some reason, maybe he wanted to go to the washroom or to the cafe, just quickly pick something and come back.
Yeah.
He has an attack. So his inhaler probably is in his office.
Yeah.
That he's just walking to the cafe to pick maybe water and come back, and there's an attack. Instantly, what can I do to help?
So the reality is that there's not much you can do. However, what our advice is that you need to stay calm. It's difficult, but you need to stay calm, especially as a parent. You know, you need to stay calm because the kid is struggling to breathe. You cannot join him or her in that
Also
distress.
struggling,
Exactly. You cannot join him or her in that
Right.
distress.
We are all panicking.
So and thankfully, I mean, if you're in an area, I hope that this would happen in an area that is still open and close to the city,
Yeah.
thereabout. So if you know what inhaler the person uses, the best thing you can do at that instant is to rush into the pharmacy and buy the inhaler. And thankfully, these inhalers are over the counter. So grab an inhaler and then help the child. But ultimately, you need to get that child to the clinic or the
Okay.
closest hospital, you see. So the inhaler or the reliever is to buy you time so that I can get the child to the hospital because
You can't
there's
do
really
mouth to
no...
mouth.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. There's really no maneuver or a technique that you would do that will prevent whatever is going on from actually happening. So you have to try and stay calm and then get to the pharmacy, get the inhaler, get the child on that inhaler whilst preparing to take that child to the hospital. But ultimately, you have within an hour to get that to get to that hospital so that we can do the additional
Are there different
measures.
types of inhalers? Because you just mentioned it.
Well, there are different. Like I said, there are relievers and there are preventers. There are different categories of inhalers. You know, typically the most common of the relievers is Ventolin. You know, so you usually have that. It's shaped like an L.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody should have that Ventolin in their pockets or somewhere. You know, then there is some the round disc one is usually a preventer. You know, so those are the two. Now, in Ghana, or some people have this concept or misconception that they can take. There are some cough medication that has, you know, so the Ventolin, the actual chemical name is salbutamol. That's the pharmacological, you know,
Term.
exactly. So there are some cough medications that has the salbutamol in it. So some asthmatics, you meet them and they say, oh, I'm taking this cough mixture, it has the salbutamol. Now, asthma, you actually need the salbutamol in the lungs, not in your blood.
Okay.
If you take the cough mixture, the salbutamol is going in your blood. It's not going to do much at the point of the attack. You know, so you still need your Ventolin on standby just in case.
So if David is my best friend or David is my boyfriend, you know,
Keep one on in your pocket.
I was going to ask that, you know, what you can do to help. I mean, if I'm around him all the time,
Yeah.
do I also need to maybe buy one and keep it up?
You know, it's interesting that you raised this issue. I actually did a short thing about this on my TikTok. So a couple actually, you know, making out, you getting all jiggy with it. And then right in the middle of the act,
Jesus is Lord.
the girl starts, you know, having an attack. So
Wow.
yes,
No,
actually.
oh boy, you take that and continue. Nah, lie.
Yes.
No, you bounce back.
So you must be
Okay.
aware and have all these precautions, you know, in place. And so you tell your boyfriend or girlfriend that in case I start struggling to breathe, please pick that thing,
Open
pick
the
that thing for
drawer.
me. You know,
Yeah.
it's always good to communicate.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, so in terms, you said there's no cure for it.
Yes.
Yeah, but in terms of medical advancement, is there hope on the horizon?
So I mean, like I said, the natural history of asthma is that as you grow older, the symptoms get better.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, by most adults who were asthmatic as children are no longer, they haven't had an asthma attack in ages. You know, so that's one side. There are medications to control it. And I also said that there are sportsmen who are asthmatic.
Yeah.
You know, so there are medications to control it. Asthma does not need to limit your normal life activities.
Yeah.
You know, the challenge is for people to actually show up for their routine visits. You know, because and it's understandable. Chronic disease, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, it's one of the most difficult things to manage.
Yeah.
You know, and so people tend to. We lose them to follow up, you know, and then the next time you see them, they are probably dead or dying, and so it can be frustrating for the health worker and for the individual as well, you know. So and thankfully there are asthma clinics in almost all the major hospitals in this country, you know, and there are asthma specialists as well, so we know what to do about it, you know. And so the medical advancements is still in line with the treatment options available. So there are good treatment options available to help you live a normal life expectancy. Asthma should not be the reason why people should die, you know. So we need to just put in measures to manage the emergencies when they do happen.
Okay. So if I have no asthma history in my family, can I get asthma?
Yes, you can. That's where the environmental aspect comes in. You know, so you might start a new job where you're working with some chemicals which could actually irritate your lungs and then cause you to develop asthma-like symptoms. But the good thing is that for most people, if you remove that trigger from there,
They are fine.
yes, they return back to their normal self. So it's up to you to take the decision to either quit that job or move to a new house, and that's a financial decision.
What's the point in making money when you can't live?
Exactly.
You know, well to enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But let me also be quick to add that when you are old and you start developing asthma symptoms, one of the first things we need to rule out is a heart disease.
Okay.
So there's actually something called cardiac asthma, which is actually a sign of heart failure. So we need to make sure that that's not what we are dealing with.
Okay.
Because like I said, typically asthma would start in children
Younger
or
age.
young adults. So if you are much older and you start experiencing this wheezing and other symptoms of asthma, we need to make sure it's not a cardiac problem, so that we don't, because the treatment is totally different.
Wow.
Hey, Charlie, this
Dr.
thing
Kevin,
here.
people will
Yeah.
definitely want to get in touch with you and find out more. So how can they reach you?
Well, I'm active on social media, you know, and you can also think international, and we'll definitely be
You
able
can
to
follow
help
him
you.
on TikTok. He's on TikTok as well. Yeah.
But Charlie, you know, keeping up on social media can be very tiring.
It is.
Am I the only person?
It's not
Charlie,
easy.
I get tired though. Because that's also another full-time job.
I know.
So I don't know the Snapchat. I can't keep up there. Facebook, I don't even go there. God.
All right, that has been a health segment. Thank you very much to Dr. Kelvin Owusu.